For the Planning Commission for April 29th. It is now 6 o'clock. Can we go ahead and get roll call, please?
Commissioner Engelkeith,
Here.
Commissioner Ware, Commissioner Ware, Commissioner Kirkley, here. Commissioner Vidal,
Here.
Commissioner Stokes, Commissioner Stokes, and Commissioner Carter,
Here.
and Commissioner McGann, here.
And since our last meeting, we have lost our Planning Commissioner, William Egner, so I would at this time just like to have a moment of silence for him. I thank you, and if everyone will stand, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I hope everyone, the commissioners here, has had a chance to look over the previous minutes. Do we have any corrections, or do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Okay, I was looking at never mind.
Roll
Wrong
call,
date.
please.
Commissioner Kirkley? Yes. Commissioner Vidal?
Abstain. I would abstain.
And Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
And I was also absent. I abstain as well.
And then you can go ahead and add, since there's only two, I'll go ahead and vote on this one.
Okay,
And then I say yes, we approve.
okay. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, minutes approved. There is no old business, so we will move on to our first new business case. Case number 2024-041 is a public hearing and a request for a variance for a proposed parking count reduction associated with the building addition to an existing structure at 4150 Goodman Road West on land consisting of 29.02 acres under C4 zoning being developed by Duplantis Design Group and owned by Walmart. And I will turn this over to our staff and director, Mr. Andrew.
Good evening. This case was brought to us by Walmart. I know the Planning Commission remembers going over the details of the reduced parking before. That was through a site plan review. The Planning Commission passed the site plan review, and then after that was passed, we talked to Walmart, who then communicated with us that their lawyers wanted to basically self-impose a variance for their insurance purposes in case anything were to go wrong with the building. They wanted to make sure that all their bases were covered for any unusual circumstances in the ordinance, any variances that weren't approved, anything that was waived. They want to go through the entire process to make sure that they have on file that a variance was passed for the parking count reduction. So a lot of this is going to be the same material as before, but they just had to repackage it, request a variance, pay the fee, fill out the application, and answer those required questions for this. So on the next slide, we have the aerial view of the Walmart property. It's got the whole store and the parking lot there. Next slide. And then that's the overall surrounding area around Walmart. Next slide, please. And so here's the current zoning. It's all within C4, the whole building, the parking lot, the adjacent lots, it's all C4, and then some PUD to the south. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to kind of run through these real quick. Let's see. A public hearing shall be held after giving at least 15 days notice. We published this in the newspaper 15 days ahead of time. And next slide, please. And next slide. And so going into the general site plan, Walmart is proposing to expand the northeast portion of the existing building for drive-up shopping operations. This is going to be 6,000 additional square feet, and it's going to jump out into the existing grass area and the parking aisle along the building. Next slide, please. And so when you zoom into that site plan, this is the part that's actually going to change. So over there on the left side, you got the proposed building expansion of 6,000 square feet. And then out in the parking lot, they're going to add crosswalks for employee safety when they deliver the items out there. And then as far as the parking spaces themselves, the length and width of the parking spaces will not be changed, and the landscape islands and landscaping will not be changed. Next slide, please. So for the parking data, while 37 parking spaces will be removed, there will still be 723 parking spaces available for the store. So although square footage is being added, this new space is not for additional customers, so there's not a need for additional parking for the building addition. And they put on the site layout notes on the plan. And so the existing parking spaces is 760 right now, and they're going to reduce that down to 723. And so the current ratio is 4.26 per 1,000 square feet, and now it's going to jump down to 3.93 per 1,000 square feet. Next slide, please. And so as part of their requirement for this, they did a parking study to show that Walmart's voluntary removal of parking spaces would not negatively affect the business of Walmart. And so we just screenshotted the letter that Duplantis Design Group sent to us confirming this. And I can just read that off real quick if y'all didn't read it yet. The purpose of this statement is to address the parking count reduction associated with this proposed project. A traffic count was performed at the store and an analysis conducted to determine if the reduction in the number of parking stalls would be problematic for store operations. The analysis of the proposed plan revealed that the maximum occupancy rate projected during Walmart's peak shopping time, Saturdays between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., would be 69% of the total parking stall count. Based on this, the proposed site plan and reduced parking count will be adequate for the proposed development. And that's the official letter they sent us. Next slide, please. And yeah, the slide basically starts off with what I just read there, and then the following is a description of why this variance request is being made. So letter A says, due to the growing demand for pickup service, the project is proposing to provide a small building expansion to thereby reduce the parking count. The existing site is fully developed and there's no room on site to add more parking. This is why a parking variance is being requested. Without approval of this variance, the store will not be able to expand pickup services to meet the demand of the pickup service operation. The parking count for the original development of the store was approved before the city revised the code to the current parking requirements. Due to the change in code requirements, this puts a restriction on the site that does not allow code required parking counts to be met. The granting of this variance would not provide a special privilege due to this being an existing developed property without any options to meet the code changes in parking requirements. And so those were the questions that they had to answer. And that concludes the presentation.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Now, my understanding is the applicant is on the, is virtual. Does he have anything he'd like to add before we start asking questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Gary LaBeouf with DDG. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm sorry we couldn't be there. We had a representative on the way today, and with the weather that passed, 2 flights were canceled, so there was no way we could get there in time. So I appreciate you guys setting up the Zoom option for us. Yeah, Andrew did a good job explaining the reasoning why we're asking for this variance after the parking reduction was approved by Walmart. But you know, the attorneys just they want to make sure that in case of a fire or a tornado or something, that they are able to rebuild without having to go through these steps again. So that's just a internal legal reason why we're asking for this after the fact. But the pickup operations at this store has grown, and to meet the demands they need to expand the building to be able to handle the products that they need. So that requires a building expansion to house. So there's no customers interacting in that area. It's all really warehouse expansion area that's being added. So I think that's pretty much sums up the reason why the expansion is being proposed. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, so does any of the commissioners have a question for the applicant or for staff? All right, if there are no questions, do we have a motion? All right, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? All right, roll call.
Commissioner Kirkley? Yes. Commissioner Bedell?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner McGann? Yes.
All right, and the motion passes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you much. I appreciate it.
All right, on to the next case. Case number 2024-040 is a public hearing and a request for conditional use for a discount store located at 6396 US Highway 51 under the C4 zoning. I'll turn this over to Mr. Andrew.
All right, so this is a case for a conditional use. Before we move on here, I don't see the applicant here.
The applicant ain't here, okay. Okay, so is the applicant here for case number 2024-4040? All right, we have in the past have always typically postponed this or tabled it for the next meeting for them to have a chance to have a representative, but this is up to the commission on how they want to handle this one today.
I think we need to table it.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to table it.
Okay, we have a motion to table and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So if we tabled it. All right, on to the next one. Case number 2024-014 is a request to recommend approval for the final plat on portions of 6870 East Center Street on land consisting of 7.85 acres under AR zoning on land owned by the city of Horn Lake. I will turn this over again to our esteemed colleague, Mr. Andrew.
All right, so up on the screen here, we got the proposed plat boundaries for this request for a final plat. I will say this is a city project, and this is the boundaries that the city has chosen to go with on land that was formerly the county's land. Next slide, please. And so right here is the same shape on top of the flood layers. Now, just pay attention to the three different colors here. The brown is where you cannot build inside, but you can build inside the red and the yellow. You got the floodway, and then the 100-year flood zone and the 500-year flood zone. But yeah, just keep that in mind. But it will be on the plat. Next slide, please. And then here's the zoning. The whole thing is in AR zoning, and the entrance off of East Center Street. Small part of that's technically in the historic district overlay, but overall, the rest of it is, all of it is in AR as well. But that's not going to be an issue with it being a city project. Next slide, please. And so here's the actual plat that was submitted to us. You got the project location up in the top corner, and then we'll get into the details on the next slide. Next slide, please. And then so here's the plat notes. General stuff that's required. Required minimum building setbacks are as follows: front yard 50 feet, side yard 20 feet when adjoining residential, none elsewhere, and 20-foot rear yard setbacks. And then it's got the required easements in there for 10-foot wide utility easement along all street frontage, 5-foot wide utility easement along all side lot lines, and a 10-foot wide utility easement along all rear lot lines. And then the water service shall be provided by Horn Lake Water Association, and then sewer service shall be provided by the city of Horn Lake. And the rest is just technical information on drawing out the plat. The next slide, please. So, yeah, basically, things I've already said. City of Horn Lake is aiming to replat this land to have enough space for a City of Horn Lake animal shelter on City of Horn Lake land. All the land is zoned AR with a small portion in the historic district overlay, and then the majority of the land is in the 100-year flood zone, with small portions of it in the 500-year flood zone and the floodway. Next slide, please. And I don't have to really go through all this. This is just the general platting procedures. Next slide. And next slide. And more of the procedures. Next slide. Next slide. And then, so here's the actual requirements within the plats that it needs to show. So I'll start reading these ones off. So any land dedicated to the city for park purposes in a subdivision shall be conveyed to the city free and clear of all encumbrances. At the same time, the plat of subdivision is filed, and said deeds to be without restrictions or covenants, except a requirement that the land be used for park purposes without reversion and with references to this subdivision, if any, on which the land is shown. So this doesn't conflict with that in any way. Next slide. And then this is only if what you're dealing with is a PUD. This is not applicable since this is zoned AR. Next slide. And then as far as easements, one of the requirements is that easements of at least 10 feet in width shall be dedicated on each side of all rear lot lines, and at least 5 feet on each side lot line, and at least 10 feet on all lot lines adjoining a street for poles, wires, conduits, storm and sanitary sewers, gas, water, and other utilities. The developer shall confer with all utility companies serving the property. Easements of greater width than normally required may be required as necessary. No side, rear, or front yard easements will be required where the city zoning ordinance indicates no yard requirements. So the plat passes all of these requirements stated here. Next slide. So whenever any stream or important surface drainage course is located in an area which is being subdivided, the subdivider shall provide an adequate easement along each side of the stream for the purpose of widening, deepening, sloping, improving, or protecting the stream or drainage course. The adequacy of the easement shall be determined by the engineer. So since this is going to be city property, the city's always going to have access to all parts of this land. And at the same time, technically, this isn't in the waterway, even though part of it's in the floodway. But this kind of doesn't apply. But even if it were to apply, this is all going to be city property, so the easements are not going to be an issue. Next slide. And then as far as the streets go, one of the requirements is the arrangements of streets in all new subdivisions shall make provisions for the continuation of the principal existing streets in the adjoining areas or their proper projection, and for any streets or roads shown on the city transportation plan. So this doesn't conflict with this requirement. The street just goes straight into the property. And all proposed street names shall avoid duplication of other street names in the county. There's no new street name being proposed here, so it's not applicable. And then the arrangements of streets and lots shall give due regard to topography and other physical features of the property, and this does not conflict with that. Next slide. And the right-of-way widths and location of major and collector streets shall conform to the right-of-way widths and locations of such streets designated on the transportation plan. However, the Planning Commission may consider any other proposed street a major or collector street and require comparable right-of-way widths. So the plat does not appear to conflict with the right-of-way widths or locations in the transportation plan. And the minimum widths of street and road right-of-way measured from lot line to lot line shall be as shown on the transportation plan, or if not shown on such plan, shall not be less than the following. The minimum right-of-way width for local streets shall be 50 feet, except that in cases where the topography or special conditions make right-of-way of less width more suitable, the Planning Commission may waive the above requirement. So the plat shows the right-of-way measurement being 60 feet, which passes the minimum requirement. Next slide. And a few more. The angle of the intersection between the streets should not vary by more than 10 degrees from a right angle. This passes that. The minimum corner radii at street intersections shall be 20 feet. Technically, a street's not drawn on the plat, so it's not going to conflict with that requirement. Street jogs resulting from failure to align streets on either side of an intersection are prohibited, and no street jogs have been proposed within this plat. And then cul-de-sac streets may be provided if proper access is given to all lots from a dedicated street or court, and the plat does not show any cul-de-sacs, so this does not conflict with that. Next slide. And that concludes the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Does any of the commissioners have any questions for the planning department? All right. Is anybody here for the acting as the applicant? All right. Is there anything you'd like to add, or if not, we'll have them up for questions. Do y'all have any questions for the applicant? Okay, if there is no questions, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve case number 2024-014 for the approval of the final plat on the portion of 6870 East Center Street on land consisting of 7.85 acres under AR zoning on land owned by the city of Horn Lake. And I request we approve this.
All right, do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Kirkley? Yes. Commissioner Vidal?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner McGann? Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. All right, on to other business. Other business is a comprehensive plan update. How are we doing on that, Mr. Andrew?
So we have received a draft. It's a rough draft, and what Orion Planning and Design have requested is that the planning staff review this rough draft, and then we give them feedback on any critiques and overall formatting revisions and things like that, and then we bounce it back to them, and then they're going to proofread it again themselves, repackage it back up, and then it will be ready for the Planning Commission and the public to review. So that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. All right, does anybody else have any other comments, concerns? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion, people trying to really step over themselves to get that motion out. We got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? All right, we got a motion and a second. Everyone in favor say aye.